Here we have a situation where they're doing the absolute minimum to try to claim this as a victory. It's no victory. They're kicking the can down the road to the U.S. Senate.
He's been a Fox News political pundit, voicing his opinion for years. But in the end, it's still all about the facts.
I am someone who is absorbing other people's thoughts, opinions, reported facts, and trying to make sense of them.
Maybe that's because his background in journalism was truly about trying to help people.
I want to know why certain people get their trash picked up and why others don't. And I want to tell that story.
He learned the hard way that voicing an opinion in such a divided time, that can come with serious consequences.
You know, so here I am 13 years later, and I still feel it, man. So when someone would say to me, oh, you know what, you're the bigot, I was like, wow.
Author, journalist Juan Williams, today on The Pulse.
We know he's wrong. I think he knows he's wrong. He told Bob Woodward he's wrong. I think people should pay attention.
I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk to people whose careers I've looked at, whose careers I hopefully kind of patterned myself after. He was doing a lot of things when I was in talk radio. I remember back years, I spoke with Juan Williams when he had a book coming out and I was producing at a talk radio station. So it is my pleasure to have him with us.
My pleasure. I tell you, my biggest title is being guest on The Pulse with Bill Anderson.
I'll take it. I'll take it. When I first became familiar with your work, I was actually working in talk radio. Okay. I believe at that point you were writing, you had books, you were doing NPR stuff. But I was kind of looking at you going, like maybe I could do that. Like maybe there's a path for me. So catch up people who may not be as familiar as kind of your background, the things you've accomplished and getting to today.
You're in Philadelphia, and I started my journalism career as a professional journalist in Philadelphia, what was then the Evening Bulletin, which was the biggest paper in Philadelphia at the time. And I was going to college just outside Philly at Haverford College, and got an internship there during college, the summer after my freshman year. And then they kept hiring me even during the school year. And I ended up things like covering Mayor Rizzo in City Hall. Wow. And being there for some, tremendous events. I mean, it was, to me, awesome. And I got internships at the Inquirer, the morning paper that still exists, right?
Yeah.
And then also an offer for an internship at the Washington Post. And the Washington Post had just gone through Watergate. I thought, well, if I'm going to be out of a job in 3 months, a young black man, I'd rather have a big name like the Washington Post on my resume so I could get a job somewhere. So I came to Washington, and that job lasted more than 20 years. And that led to my first book, which is called Eyes on the Prize, America's Civil Rights Years. And there's a PBS TV special that was made in conjunction with that project and got a lot of attention. And in many ways, that project then led to my second book, which was a biography of Thurgood Marshall, which is 25 years old this year, and a book about being Muslim, because I got fired by NPR when I said, oh my gosh, this was after 9/11. I get scared when I was in the airport right after 9/11 and see people dressed in Muslim garb. So people say, oh, that's a bigoted statement that you just made, especially because I was making it on Fox and people have strong feelings. And so all of a sudden I got fired by NPR. So that's all part of who I am.
It sounds like you always embraced and loved kind of the work and the, in quotes, capital J journalism.
Today, when I'm talking to classrooms filled with young people who are looking at journalism, oftentimes, they want to be the anchor. They want to be the big paycheck, right? They say, oh, who gets their face and fame from, it's like you're a celebrity journalist. And, when I got into it, my feeling was, as a kid in Brooklyn, I want to know why certain people get their trash picked up and why others don't. And I want to tell that story. I want to tell the story about why when the cops show up in my neighborhood, it's like, we're not the citizens, but we're the suspects. But I wanted to help people understand power and who had power and how power was being exercised. To me, that was the thrill. That was the ego's gratification in doing journalism. But I still think if I can tell people, if Bill can tell people how the world works and give them, you know, their family, their friends, their community a better chance of success, I think that's the biggest payoff of all.
But I remember, I guess I'm old enough to remember the whole NPR situation and how it was interesting, it was startling that the person who had been championing these causes and was speaking out, all of a sudden, because of one comment, was being called the bigot, was
Right.
being called what was that like? Even then, I wanted to ask, like, wow, it's quick. Interesting how quick, you know, the kind of definition can change of you.
Well, you know what was hurtful, and I say that with some emotion, it rises up in me as I'm speaking to you, Bill. It's a little bit, it was baffling to me, but I say painful. And I say that's why I'm slowing down in my response, because I just want to convey that even these years later, so that happened in like 2010. And, you know, so here I am 13 years later, and I still feel it, man, because all through my life and everything from where I live to where I work and worship and, you know, and kind of the fruit of my mind has been about being part of a larger effort to be clear with people about equality and opportunity and power and how power works. And most often in my writings about civil rights, how power works against people who are minorities, racial minorities and ethnic minorities in our society, in our world. And so when someone would say to me, oh, you know what, you're the bigot, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much like, you know, taking an eraser to my sense of self and my identity, and to the way that I saw myself and trying to speak truth to power about race and racism and bigotry in American life.
Coming up next, more on the personal impact of the NPR controversy.
I look up, man, there's my face and, you know, bigot. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yes.
How can this be me, right?
Felt as if not only was I being infantilized and made somehow less of an intellect and as a professional journalist, but my entire reputation and, you know, what I do as a journalist was being diminished in such a way that it would harm my value to future employers, that people would say, you know, I just don't take that man seriously because, in fact, my journalism and my work oftentimes requires me to say things that don't make people happy.
And what I had done was I was on a show and the argument was being made that a mosque should not be located near ground zero where the 9/11 attack had occurred.
Right.
And I was saying, wait a second, I understand that people are fearful or anxious or now even angry at people who are Muslim because they said, oh, the attackers were Muslim. I said, that's why when I went into the airport right after 9/11, I saw people dressed in Muslim garb, I was uptight and fearful. But I went on to say, but I understand we're in America and we have equal rights and they're going through the magnetometer and, you know, but it was just an anxiety. I was admitting to this then to make the case, as long as the zoning regulations are in place to allow places of worship to be there, as long as it's allowed under law, then there's no reason that we should be objecting to a mosque being located in that location.
But you never got to that.
That was the whole, right.
You never got to that.
Argument. But instead, what I got, and let me tell you, this came like fast and furious. I woke up, man, I was in a hotel in New York, you know, and in those days they would leave the newspaper, you know, USA Today and the Times, the New York Post at the door of your hotel room for you in the morning. I look up, man, there's my face and, bigot. I'm like, what is going on here?
But shortly thereafter, Fox then comes and says, we want that perspective. Here's a new contract. Like, you come and share that perspective on Fox. At least from the outside, that's how it appeared. You were already working with Fox.
Well, no, I'd already been with Fox. I had been with Fox from the mid-'90s, shortly after Fox was created, talking about the Fox News Channel. So what happened was that the man who ran Fox at the time said to me, you know what, I don't want you to go home and say to your wife that you lost a dime behind this, because I don't think that was fair to you. And so we're going to make up for that in terms of the contract. It was simply sort of making it clear to everybody that Fox wasn't backing down because I had been labeled in this way, and in my opinion, and in their opinion, unfairly and mislabeled as this kind of bigot.
But in that moment, one side is calling you bigot and, as we said, sellout. Then you're going on doing the Fox, and I don't know exactly what it was like then, but I've watched you on the 5, and there's times that I sat back and went, wow, he's defending himself in perspective against 4 different people. So one side is sitting there saying, you're not necessarily with us. The other side, you're in there defending the side that's not defending you. Like, what was that perspective like?
I didn't see myself necessarily as about representing a liberal, conservative, even moderate view, or black or white view. I was representing what I considered to be the truth and speaking my truth.
Okay.
When I say the truth, I'm not suggesting that Bill's truth is Juan's truth. Bill comes from a different place and time, community, and so I would be interested in hearing what Bill has to say. But I wouldn't think, because Bill's a black man and in Philadelphia and of a certain age, that he's got to represent that community specifically. I would say, you know what, I'm going to ask Bill about his experience, and I would like to hear from Bill, but I want Bill to be honest with me. I was operating in an environment where there were people who were like, you know what, I can get clicks and I can generate followers and I can be an influencer if I represent a political point of view. And so I'm going to be here for one audience. And I'm going to say to the audience, I'm your voice, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say, no, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you what I see is going on in the world.
Next, he's often debating a whole panel all by himself, and he actually enjoys that.
The excitement of the conversation. Can you make your point? Can you at least come across as having something to say?
We know what stacking the court really is. It's adding more judges, okay?
No, stacking is when you don't let Democrats legitimately nominate a candidate.
Every time a Democrat nominates,
the president nominated Garland. The Senate just didn't.
No, they wouldn't hear. They wouldn't give him a vote.
Well, there's a difference.
Now we're 6 weeks out. You say, give this person a vote.
Kagan.
I came and sat in on an episode of The 5, which was telling because not only did I see what was on TV, but I also saw the relationships to some extent behind the scenes and talking in commercial breaks. And on TV, it felt like you're ducking and dodging, and I'm put up my guard because it's coming at me from all directions. So it felt like you were there representing that perspective, but you still were just representing what you viewed as your truth, regardless of it coming at you from all angles.
So it was 4 against 1, as you pointed out earlier. And Bill Anderson is sitting there watching me duck and dive, like a boxer in the ring. But who I am is still true to me because I'm trying to speak my understanding of the facts, the situation, the reality, the people, the ideas, and not necessarily say, because I'm here as a black person or I'm here as today as I'm speaking to you, Bill, I'm 69, or I'm speaking to you as the kid from Brooklyn or anything. No, I'm just telling you as a professional journalist who was committed in much the way that I'm talking to you, Bill, today. I'm just going to tell you the truth as I understand it. And if I'm wrong, but I'm going to be responsible and accountable for that wrong. You know, people can call in and they can say that Juan Williams, he's this, that, you know, sellout, he's a Tom, he's this, he's that, from one perspective. And they may not hear the other perspective where people call in and say, oh, that Juan Williams, he's that crazy liberal. Right. He's so far out there. He doesn't understand, you know, my life or he's the racist, he's the bigot. You know, it's coming at you like a snowstorm, man. And if you stop and you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to respond here, I'm going to respond there. I think pretty soon you might lose a sense of who you are and you might even lose the value you have to those people who are critical of you, which is allowing them to hear a contrary voice.
If there's 5 million people watching, maybe half don't care what I have to say because I'm that liberal, you know, and just kind of push it aside. And he's like, but you're still talking to 2+ million people who may hear and need to have these types of discussions.
But it's often the case that there are more liberals listening, watching, tuned into Fox than there are liberals, moderates, tuned in to CNN, MSNBC, the liberal stations, right? You got to understand there are lots of people listening, and that sometimes there are people like you in terms of your political affiliation or political orientation. They're listening. There are people there who are open to you, and there may be people there who agree with you. It may not be as many, but they're there. But it's the value, and I think to some level, the excitement of the conversation. Can you make your point? Can you at least come across as having something to say, to add to the conversation, to join the debate? And I think that's very important in this country.
Coming up, what it's like to have 10 million people watch your emotional reaction to history.
And I said, I just can't believe that a black man just won the Iowa caucus. And I started getting teary. I said, I didn't know that this was going to happen in my lifetime.
I think the fact that Trump is running and that Trump is doing so well is the glue that's holding lots of factions of the Democratic Party behind Joe Biden.
You still enjoy the opportunity to speak your truth?
Oh, man, I think it's a blessing from God himself. You know, I remember being in Iowa the night of the Iowa caucuses, 2008. So I guess that was January 2008. And Barack Obama wins the Iowa caucus. So I'm surrounded by high-powered political commentators, but I was the only black person sitting there. And I said, I just can't believe that a black man just won the Iowa caucus. And I started getting teary. I said, I didn't know that this was going to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And the rest of them were like, wow, you could see for them, it was like, wow, he's having a separate experience. So that's, when you say, oh, you got to speak your truth and your heart to set, on a night like that, when big politics is happening, you have 10 million people, man.
Is it fair to ask somebody with multiple books, multi-million audience, doing all these things, what's next?
Well, I'm working on a book right now. And so I am of a mind that, in fact, we have different players in different roles than you would have assigned them back in the mid-20th century, but that we are still going through tremendous change. So this book that I'm thinking about is kind of the unfolding of a modern civil rights movement, beginning with Obama, the first black president, through the kind of reaction, response, backlash that you might identify with President Trump, and then going forward to this moment, talking about where are we going from here.
This has been strangely empowering to me, like hearing this discussion and the kind of motivation, even through challenging times and confronting difficult opinions and taking the hits and keep going forward. That's inspiring. So I thank you. We end the Pulse with the concept of use your voice for good.
I am someone who is absorbing other people's thoughts, opinions, reported facts, and trying to make sense of them. I want to know more. And so for me, in answer to your question, Bill, it's empowering to be able to think through, to engage in conversation dialogue that is productive, that leads somewhere, that achieves a good. In other words, if I have a conversation with Bill on the Pulse, and Bill said that you felt this whole thing had been empowering, hey, for me, that was the payoff. That Bill and I had a conversation that inspired each other, and that hopefully for the Pulse audience can be like, that was worth time. That was something. Did you see what Bill did? That was great. I'm glad I tuned in and got that episode of the Pulse.
This one was really interesting to me. I guess just because over the years of following his career, I always had those questions that I wanted to ask about how he responded to certain situations, what he was feeling in those moments, and how he made his decisions. So it was fun for me to get a chance to ask them, and I hope you enjoyed his answers. Hit me up on social media. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you at Bill A. Fox29. Thank you so much for watching. We'll do it all again next week. And I leave you today, as I always do, reminding you that whenever you can, use your voice for good, and have a good one.